I should say my life began to radically change right after a dinner at home with Kathy, and it was October 25th, 1992. I was 39 years old. Kathy and I were married for 15 years. I had 3 kids with 1 on the way. I had a house, we had cars, we had a second home, and we had private school tuition. I had no job, I had no income, and I had no way. What happened to me? And I'm here to tell you. It started, I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, to my parents being Mary and Marty Paparelli. Mary, my mother, was an immigrant from Austria-Hungary, and she practiced God's way. My father was a first-generation Italian-American, and he practiced man's way. And I have a sister who is 11 years older than me. When I was about 12 years old, my curiosity about girls got the best of me. I started to change, and I wanted to know more. I cornered these older, if you will, teenagers, and I remember we were sitting on the porch of Ronnie DiMattio's porch in Jersey City, New Jersey, in a summer, and they gave me this lesson on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. All I did was play sports before that, and now they opened my eyes. And I looked at the world differently from that moment on, 12 years old. I looked at my parents differently. I looked at girls differently. I looked at my whole life differently. My interests completely changed. And I practiced this. I went to school for 12 years in parochial school. The last 4 years were in New York City at a school called Xavier High School, which was a Jesuit military school. Practicing sex, drugs, and rock and roll in New York at that time with a drinking age of 18 worked out to be extraordinarily easy and inviting. By the time I got to my senior year in high school, I had a decision that was presented to me. I needed to make a decision. Am I going to follow God's way, or am I going to follow man's way? I looked, and I wanted to be a man, and I looked to my father, and he followed man's way. And I started running down that as hard as I could, and man's way was simple. Get an education, get a good job, work hard, support your family, smoke, drink, and party with your friends. And I had done pretty well with that. But when I got to the 12th grade, that's when I said, look, I'm feeling guilty about myself. This doesn't make sense. I'm a good guy. People like me. So I looked and I said, I'm going to go my father's way. I'm going to go man's way. And I shut the door on God's way because it made me feel guilty. I shut the door and I turned my back on God and I actually walked the other way. And I didn't look back. And I perfected man's way by going to the University of Miami. That is a wonderful place to practice man's way. 4 years later, I graduated with a degree in accounting, and I went to work for a small CPA firm. And in that CPA firm, I worked as hard as I could. I had jumped the wall from service and hourly work, which I did full-time while going to school full-time, and I jumped the wall from service annually work to what I'll call blue-collar work to professional ranks and became this accountant. And I worked for 6 months there as hard as I could, and I looked around that room and I said, I'm not as good at this as these other people. I don't think I should be an accountant. So I didn't know what to do. And it was about that time that IBM called on our owner, and IBM had come out with a new computer. This was in 1976. They came out with the IBM System 32. And that computer was billed as the first affordable small business computer. My boss got very interested in it, and he walks into the staff room and he says, is anybody interested in coming with me and my executive assistant down to Coral Gables, Florida, to the IBM office to see a presentation on how this might increase our profitability and growth? Well, I could not raise my hand with enough enthusiasm to go with him, because that meant I didn't have to do accounting that day. And we go there, and something happened that changed my life, put me on a new course. IBM knew all about computers, and they knew all about operating systems, but IBM did not know anything about the CPA business. For that, they flew a guy in from Mobile, Alabama, and they had him come in, and his name is Richard Brock. He was the first entrepreneur that I ever met in my life. And I was so excited about this guy. He knew more about CPA firms than anybody that I ever talked to. He had an overview of how to grow them profitably. He understood how to do billing and receivables, and he understood how partners interact with each other, and how to get these firms to be more profitable. But he had a passion in him that I had never seen in any other business person. In fact, any other person that I had met in my life up to that time, and I was 22 years old. So I wanted to work with Richard. And what happened is we wound up buying this computer and his software, and we spent day and night on the phone trying to make this stuff work, because back then software didn't work. It was a great promise, and it was exciting to work on it, but it just didn't work. So we'd be on the phone, and sometimes I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, look, this is what I did. And he said, how did you ever figure that out? He says, we can't make it work here. You made it work there. Well, that started our relationship, and he said, man, you need to come work for me. Because if you work for me, you can sell a lot of software and we could be rich. That's all he cared about, was selling the software, not making it work. So he said to me, I said, how will this thing work if I have to leave the CPA firm? He says, you moved to Mobile, Alabama. I said, I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey. I said, I have never been west of I-95. He says, you're going to love it here. Well, I did. I wound up moving to Mobile, and it was great. Being in a startup, you do every single job that's available. I learned how to program. I learned how to sell. I learned how to install. I learned how to support people. I learned everything. I actually was the accountant that actually did the books so that we can get loans from the bank. I don't even know why they lent us money. We had no collateral, but we were enthusiastic young men. Anyway, what happened is I started traveling. That was the beauty of it. At 22 years old, I'm traveling around the United States installing this software that we sold. I found myself in Denver, Colorado. And in Denver, Colorado, I'm working at Whittemore and Company. And back then, in these small CPA firms, they would put their children on the computer because they said that's the new thing, that's the up-and-coming thing. And that's what they did. And I started working with Jared Whittemore, trying to get this software working, of which most of it worked, but I got stuck towards the end of the day, and I was getting frustrated. And he looks at me and he goes, you know, I've got a date like in an hour with my girlfriend, and she has her friend in town. You know, would you like to go on a blind date? I said, immediately. Nothing's working for you. I didn't tell him that, but I was ready to get out of it. So we did. I got in his car. We go there, and he walks up to the front door. His girlfriend opens the door, and it's Kathy. And we look at each other, and we just know that we're supposed to be together forever. I don't know why, but it just hit us that way. It was love at first sight. We spent that evening, my blind date, by the way, got delayed and never showed up. So the three of us went out, and Kathy and I spent the entire evening trying to dump Jared. Because we weren't interested in him, we were interested in each other. 7 months later, we got married. Jared was in the wedding, so it's okay. He was in the wedding. Richard was in the wedding, Richard Brock, who was my partner, and also my father was the best man at the wedding. And we went back to, I moved Kathy, we went on our honeymoon, came back to Denver, drove across the country, and we set up our home in January of 1977, or excuse me, May of 1977 in Atlanta, and we have been there ever since. We're now married 46 years, as you heard in the opening remarks from Brent. It's just been a pleasure. I love you, Kathy. Thank you. Great how it worked out. Here we are in this new thing called package software, and big companies started to get interested because they didn't know how to write it. They didn't know how to work with these companies that were all of these vertical market software companies. And we become an attractive acquisition. 5 years later, at 28 years old, a company called Informatics General Corporation came to us and wanted to buy us. And they bought us, and when they bought us, I became a millionaire at 28 years old. I was making $60,000 a year then. And I'm telling you, it was the most money that I ever saw in my entire life. And then I had all the money in the world we sold this business. I was a minority shareholder, but still, it just changed everything for me. I mean, I come from a middle-class family. My father never made more than $29,000 his entire year. He worked 38 years on the railroad. He wasn't there for that moment when we sold, but I think it would have overwhelmed him as it did me. What happened from there is I changed. I said, this felt so good that I said, if this is what it means to become wealthy, to become powerful, I said, I want more. I want more money. I want more power. I want more influence in life. I want more stuff. This is so great. Kathy and I only had one child at the time. But this drive for more, okay, really, I didn't realize it, but it was the beginning of my end. As I got into my 30s, I started just chasing more. I left my family behind. I was on the road all the time, doing things with people who are on the road all the time do. We don't really talk about our families. Once we get on that plane, we're gone. And it was amazing. From the outside, I was somebody who was admired. From the inside, I was empty, I was unfulfilled, I was depressed, and I was filled with guilt. And that was my life. Well, over time, this drive to become even bigger, I became more and more successful and more empty. And at some point in a recession, I wound up, for the first time in my life, losing my job. And that brings me back to that dinner with Kathy. Kathy and I had dinner. We had a bottle of wine. She drank a glass. I drank the rest of the bottle. And then I went and I sat down at the TV, and I was watching the World Series. Congratulations, by the way, to the Texas Rangers. I was watching the World Series, and I was doing what I did every night, and that was I was drinking one beer after the next. And it hit me while I'm sitting there all alone. Our bedroom door is closed, and Kathy's in the bedroom. Julia, my oldest daughter, her bedroom door is closed. Lisa, my second daughter, her bedroom door is closed. And my son, David, his bedroom door is closed. I'm sitting there all alone. And I said, you've done it. You've become your father. You see, my father was an alcoholic. Functioning alcoholic, but an alcoholic. And he would stay out every night, and he would come home around 10 or so. And as a kid, I'd be watching TV. It would just be me and my mom, and in some cases my sister eventually, she left, but she would be around, but mostly me and my mom. And when he drove in, the headlights from his car would wash across the living room wall. And as soon as that happened, I shut the TV off and ran into my bed because I wanted him to think that I was asleep, because he was unpredictable. He'd come home and he might start a fight with my mom and wake everybody up, wake me up and start a fight, or start something with my sister. So I had this sort of fight or flight in me from a very, very young age. And I swore I would never do that to my kids if I ever had kids. But here they are, all locked away in their room. They don't want to be with me because I'm unpredictable. And it was at that time that I got a vision, clear as day in my life. And the vision was, if you keep doing what you're doing, living the life you're living, you're going to lose whatever chance you had at a career. Secondly, you're going to lose the love of your life, Kathy. And last, you're going to lose your kids. And this is the thing that really scared me. I was so over the edge that I thought, if I lose my kids, I don't think I'm going to care. Who had I become? What happened to me? But that vision was so clear. The next day I got up and I called this fellow, Jim, who was a district manager for a very big company, lived in this former neighborhood that I was in. And I called him up. I said, hey, Jim. He thought I wanted to sell him something. So he said, what do you want? You never call me. And I said, no, I need some help. I said, I just want to talk to you. I heard that you went to a recovery session. I want to talk to you about alcoholism. And he said, let's meet for lunch. So we met for lunch, and Jim is going through his life with me. And as he's going through his life, he said, let me tell you where this ends. He says, you're going to wake up and he said, no, he didn't say you. He said, he's telling his story. I woke up in the morning. This is a man with a wife of, I don't know, he was probably 35 years married at the time, 15 years older than me. So he has a wife and 3 kids. He says, when I woke up in the morning, I'd go into the refrigerator and take out a 16-ounce Bud, sit down and read the paper. And then, on the way to work, he said, before I left, I would go to the refrigerator, take another 16-ounce Bud, get in my car, put it between my legs, and drive to work, where, of course, I had a refrigerator with more alcohol in it. And I'm thinking, this guy is hosed up. How bad is that? And this little voice in my head said, could that happen to you? And I said, yeah, that could happen to you. As I'm thinking, he says, how about we go to an AA meeting tonight? I said, I'm not that messed up. I don't have that problem. He says, no, I know you don't. He says, but I think you'll find it interesting. I said, I don't want to go. He goes, no, this is in the basement of a bank. He says, it's a suburb. We're in the suburbs. The people all look like us. Don't worry about it. I said, all right, you were not kind enough to buy me lunch. I'm going to go with you. I went home. I got in my best suit because I was not going to be one of those people. So I go there, and I walk in. Thank goodness, there were 60 people in that room, so there was high anonymity. So I went to the corner of the room. I sat in the way back with him, and I sat with my head down on my legs like this. I was just hoping I didn't see anybody I knew or anybody that knew me. I was so totally embarrassed. We get to the end, and I don't remember anything that happened in that first meeting. We get to the end of the meeting, and something happened that I never saw in any other meeting that I ever went to. Some painter, at the very end of the meeting, everybody usually stands up and holds hands and says the Lord's Prayer. Everybody stood up. I didn't know that then. Everybody stood up, and this painter, in his white painting outfit with paint all over him, he says, everybody sit down. So everybody sits down. So I sit down. I said, I wonder what's up with this guy. He points to me. He says, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here. But if you want to stop drinking one day at a time, you're going to do these 2 things. 1, you're going to come up here and you're going to get this white chip. And you're going to agree to not drink one day at a time. And the second thing you're going to do is you are going to get on your knees every morning. And you're going to say, God, keep me sober today. And every night you're going to say, thank you, Lord, for keeping me sober today. That man died from colon cancer 2 years later at 45 years old. You know, I don't remember his name, but he completely changed my life. He gave me permission to do the two things that I wanted to do most. One is I wanted to stop drinking one day at a time. See, what I didn't tell you is every day I would get up, every morning for 10 years through my 30s, and I would say, today you are not going to have a drink. And every day at 5 o'clock, my mouth would start watering. By 6 o'clock, I had a drink in my hand. Imagine how I felt about myself. I had discipline for everything. But for this, every day, for 10 years, I broke a promise to myself. Every day. And now I knew a way to not drink one day at a time. And the second thing that he did is he gave me permission to talk to God. Remember, when I was a senior in high school, I closed the door on God and walked away. And I did. I was away. But in my 30s, I would find myself dropping into churches for no apparent reason. If I'd be on business trips, and I would just drop into a church. And I would stand in there. I'm like, why am I here? I don't even know why I'm here. There was something that I don't know. It's just maybe that's from my past. That was the place of safety. But one thing that happened is I didn't feel like I could talk to God. Because one of the things that I learned about drinking, if you can think it sober, you'll do it loaded. If you can think it sober, you'll do it loaded. And that brings on some pretty bad things that I said to people and some things that I did that I'm not very, very proud of that made me feel very, very guilty. Where did I go with that? I didn't know where to go with that. I couldn't get it released. It just became like stuck to me like a tar baby. It's who I was. And after about 180, I'd agree. They tell you to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I was so afraid because of the vision that I had. I did 180 meetings in 180 days. I would not miss a meeting. Poor Kathy, she had to take care of our kids at night, and here I am running off to go to an AA meeting at night. And everybody around me saying, you don't have a drinking problem. I'm like, I remember my daughter saying to me, my older daughter, she said, you drink like all the other dads in the neighborhood. I said, oh, really? I said, well, what about Scott? She goes, yeah. I said, well, how many beers do you think he drinks in a week? She goes, I don't know, 6. I said, I drink 2 cases a week. She goes, oh, maybe you do have a problem. But in one of those meetings at the end of 6 months, the fellow that was facilitating the meeting was on the topic, who's your higher power? I'm like, I wonder what people are going to say. So one person said, my higher power are the people in this room. That's my higher power. That's where I get my strength. Another one held up the book of AA and said, this is my higher power. And the third one said, my sponsor is my higher power. And I'm saying, you have 12 years of religious training, and you know none of those are the higher power. None of those are God. I said, I wonder who this God is that did this miracle in my life and took away this desire for alcohol. Now, I don't know what happens. Jesus made he's quoted as saying, ask and it will be given, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open. Well, I didn't know that back then, but I asked that question, who is this God? I must have put off some sort of a scent. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden these Christian people that were in the Atlanta technology sector started coming to me. One guy comes and he says, hey, would you like to go to a dinner? There's going to be 50 people. I said, sure, I'll go to a dinner. I'm unemployed. Maybe I'll meet somebody. Maybe they'll think I can do something for them. And he said, he takes me to this dinner, and this regional manager for MCI, some of you who have been around as long as I have know who MCI is, but they busted up AT&T, by the way. But MCI, he's this big shot, and he's talking about his business. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And he's talking about his career, and I'm like, check, 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 check. And then out of nowhere, he starts talking about his relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm like, what is this? What is this? I came to listen to a guy who's the regional manager for MCI. Then another guy, Christian guy, and as a guy that I used to work with for years, and about 5 years prior to him coming to me, he would try to talk to me about Jesus. And I finally got to him over lunch and I said, Robert, you need to just shut up. I don't want to know. Leave me alone. Well, 5 years later, things changed. And he said, hey, I'd like you to come to a high-tech prayer. I'd like you to come to a prayer breakfast. I think it was something that was done by his church. I walk in there, and the keynote speaker is Adolf Coors IV. The guy who owns the brewery, the guy with all the beer in the world, is talking to the guy who wanted all the beer in the world. How can this be? And he had a magnificent story. And then we leave there, and I get invited to a high-tech prayer breakfast. The first one I ever went to. It was the second one. We just finished our 31st one, but it was the second one. And I got invited by that same guy who I told to shut up 5 years earlier. And the speaker that day was, I can't remember his first name, Lanier, but he started Lanier Worldwide. Very impressive. I don't remember anything he said. But at the end of that breakfast, this fella, Jerry Young type guy, whose name is Bill Leonard, who started the high-tech prayer breakfast. He was in the real estate business like Bob Nuttall is, and he started this high-tech prayer breakfast. He specialized in technology companies. He got up at the end and he talked about what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus Christ and how to have that relationship. I don't remember all the words, but I left that meeting just overwhelmed by the conviction in his voice and in his eyes when he talked about Jesus. I left that meeting, that breakfast, and went to see an investment banker. And he said, it's great. He said to me, can you believe that Bill Leonard guy? Were you at that thing? I said, yeah, I was there. I said, what do you mean, can you believe him? He goes, what a lot of nerve he had to say that. I said, wait a minute, man. I said, do you believe in anything like he believes in this Jesus thing? He goes, no, I guess I don't. So I called Bill up. I had started a little company with a partner, name was Claudine, and he said, how can I help you? And I said, Bill, I was at your prayer breakfast. I said, I'm looking for office space. Can you help me? So he came, and I was in sublet space, no windows. We sat in our conference room, no windows. I still remember where we were. I don't think the conference room could hold more than 4 people. And I'm talking to Bill, and he says, what space need you have? And I told him. And then I said to him, I need a favor. He said, what else? I said, you seem to know a lot of Christian people in this technology sector. Is there any way you can kind of introduce me into this new network? And he said, sure. See, what I didn't tell him is when you go to AA, one of the things they tell you to do is you got to dump all your friends. Because it takes a lifetime to get friends who could keep up with you when you're drinking. Well, you can't go back to them because you'll go back. So I stayed home all the time. Okay? I wouldn't go to parties. Kathy's miserable about the whole thing. Our life had changed, but she hung in there with me. And he says, you should go to this Bible study. It's on Friday mornings, 7 a.m., at a restaurant in the Perimeter in Atlanta. And I said, okay. So the night before I went, I looked all over the house for a Bible. I found this Bible that must have gotten wet at some point because it was one of those dried out, swollen books. But I never read a Bible. I didn't know what a Bible was. So I said, well, I'm going to Bible study. You know, you gotta bring a Bible, right? I mean, you're going to go there, you have to be ready. So I went in with this thing. These men were so welcoming to me. I just never had that kind of acceptance just poured over me, you know, as I went in there. And they taught me the Bible, and we talked about it, and it was enlightening to me, and I found it extraordinarily interesting. And I learned more of what Bill was talking about at the end of that breakfast, of what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Well, on the way to Hilton Head, on the way to my second home, about that time, Kathy and the kids were there. I'm driving down I-16, and I'm listening to the cassette tape, I'm dating myself, the cassette tape of Adolf Kors IV giving his story again. And so I listened, and at the end of that, he said, if you haven't committed your life to Christ, why not? How's it working out for you? And I'm thinking, it ain't working good. My marriage is on a razor's edge. I don't have a career job, income. I don't have any interest from people. The business that I'm investing in is going south quickly. I have this overwhelming sense of guilt that I can't seem to shed. So, Mr. Kors, it ain't working out so good. He said, so why don't you just give it all to Christ? You know, He died for you so that your sins will be forgiven and your guilt will be lifted from you. And then He rose from the dead so that you would have this hope from now through eternity, knowing that you'll be with God forever and ever. And I said, I'm in. I'm driving, breaking the law, going down I-16. And I committed my life to Christ. I'm in. I said, Jesus, please take me. Please forgive my sins. I believe in you. The next half of I-16 felt like a mile because I was so excited. There was this lightness about me. I couldn't wait to get to Hilton Head. So I get to Hilton Head, and I'm like, what do I do now? So I get to Hilton Head, and I drove to a church. So I go to this church, go to the door, it's locked. So I go around the back, and they got a little garden, so I sat in this garden, and I sat there, and I said, God, what just happened to me? And there was no answer. So then I got up, and I got in the car, and I went to Kathy, and I was so excited about what had happened to me that I told her nothing. Because you're married for 15 years, she knew me pretty well. I can't just come in and go, oh, I found Jesus, okay? I didn't know what she was going to react with. She just went through all this AA stuff, and now I'm going to hoist this Jesus stuff on her. And so I just was quiet about it. But I went back to Atlanta, and I was at a Southeast Software Association meeting. And Bill Leonard happened to be there. And on the way out, we're walking towards the parking deck, and I said, hey, Bill, you've really poured some of yourself, and you poured yourself into my life, and I just need to tell you, I did commit my life to Jesus Christ. He said, that is amazing. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. He says, I'm so happy for you. He said, now you need to be a table host at the high-tech prayer breakfast. I said, man, I can't do that. People know me. I know me. I can't just all of a sudden, right? And he catches me in the, he pinned me to the wall, a column in the parking deck, until I said yes. Now the beauty of that was, just like here, it thrust me into admitting to my friends that I follow Jesus. I wouldn't have ever done that. So I invited people to the prayer breakfast. I had to fill 9 seats. That was the best table I have ever had in my life, because I didn't hang out with Christian people. They were my drinking buddies and everybody else, and they come. And 2 things happened. One is they heard the same message that I heard. They actually heard what's the good news, if you will, of Jesus. And then secondly, they looked at me differently. They're like, Charlie Paparelli is a Jesus follower. Because only Jesus followers invite you to prayer breakfasts. All right? There were some of those men at that table actually, over our lifetime, came to know the Lord. And the way it happened is, once they knew who I was and saw how excited I was about it, wherever we went, golf tournaments or hanging out at people's houses, it would open up conversations because it was okay. You say, don't talk about politics or religion? Well, it was okay to talk to Charlie about that stuff. So it became a very comfortable sort of a deal. It was just wonderful for us. Things changed pretty rapidly then, right after that. I'm going to get into some of the things that Brent was talking about and he was challenging me with. Is Bill Leonard called me at the end of that prayer breakfast, and he said, hey, I just found you this new office space. By then I had turned into an angel investor. The business that I had started with this lady, was failing because of me. She came into me one day in our windowless office and said, I can't work for you. I don't think anybody can work for you. I was a dream boss. So she left. Shortly after that, another fellow who is my best friend, we'd worked together for years, and now he's my former business partner. He shows up, Bob Lasher. He's at table number 95. He came in and he said, you got to know a lot of people in town. He said, I need some networking because I want to find a new job. He was the best salesman that I ever met in my life. He was known in Atlanta as the best software salesman in Atlanta. And I said, Bob, you know who you are now. You're 37 years old. You need to just start your own company. He goes, what? He says, that sounds awful. I said, no, this is an opportunity to start your own company. You should do that because you know who you are. You could bring that value system, that culture into that company because you're a class guy. And he said, okay, what kind of company would I start? I said, I happen to have one. And that's how we became partners. He took that business over, had virtually no income. He actually grew it to $7.5 million in sales. From that, he spun out another business which got to $6 million in sales, and it wound up selling at a very, very high price. Very successful, one of the best entrepreneurs that I ever met in my life. And he's my best friend. But here's what happened. Bill calls me up and he says, I got you this office space. We finished the Bible, we finished the prayer breakfast. We're going to do a 4-week study on who is Jesus and who's the Bible. And I need office space to do it. I need a conference room. You got the perfect conference room. And I remember sitting on the phone and I just panicked, thinking, if people go in my conference room with Bibles, what are the people that are around me? What is Bob going to think? This is nuts. This is all going through my head. Bill said, oh, you must be worried that I'm going to use the coffee and all that. We'll pay for all that. I said, I am not worried about you're going to use too much coffee. So I said, yeah, you can use it. I'll get you a key. So Bill's, just before he hangs up the phone, he goes, you could come. He said, it is your office. So I came. And there was 4 other guys that showed up at that study. None of us know anything about the Bible. Nothing. And Bill Leonard and Emma Morris, who was the other person, they taught this 4-week study. At the end of 4 weeks, they said, we're done. I said, what do you mean you're done? They said, we're done. We said it was a 4-week study. We're done. We're leaving. We're not coming back. I said, but I like this. I said, I want to do more of this. And he said, well, I don't know what to tell you because we're done. I said, what about you guys? Do you want to keep going? They said, yeah, I want to keep going. I said, how about if I lead the Bible study? He goes, you don't know anything about the Bible. I said, it's a book. I said, I'll read the book. We'll talk about the book. And that's a Bible study. And he said, I don't think I feel good about this. Emma comes in and saves the day. She goes, look, here's what I'll do. I've got time. I'll do the next 4 weeks with them and just kind of keep an eye on Charlie so that he doesn't run off the rails. And I did. And I mean, she did and I did. Did not run off the rails. And at the end of 4 weeks, she left. I want to tell you, over the next year, that Bible study of people who didn't know the Bible but were willing to sit down and talk about it were so excited that we all just started to talk to other people about this study that we're doing. It got to, within a year, that conference room would hold 12 people. We would have 12 people around the table, 12 people on the perimeter or more, and people out into the lobby attending that study. God created this revival from somebody who didn't know anything about the Bible but was willing to just get together and let's talk about it. It was such a season in everybody's life. We were all in our early 40s. We all wanted to know more. We all were chasing our ambition only to find it was unfulfilling. And here they were. So marriages were saved in that study. Many people came to know Jesus through that study. And I got so excited about it, I started doing them twice a week. Then I started doing them in other locations and other business locations. And more people came to those. And I taught other people how to do them. And that's how this sort of rolled out. What was interesting about those studies, here I am an angel investor. One of the things you need is good deal flow. Second thing you need is you need to know the people you're investing in. Well, entrepreneurs would show up at the study. And then professional services guys who serve the startup community, they would show up at the study. We all became this community, the startup community, this Christian startup community, in fact, where we all knew each other, and all of my deals really came through those studies. So I didn't have any of that plan. In fact, if somebody came and they were looking to raise money or they were looking for something from us, they would never come back again because they knew we were there to just study the Bible. It wasn't this double duty thing. It just happened that way when you start trusting each other. And that then turned into me having leadership positions within my community because I became somebody who was trusted. They didn't believe that maybe what I believed. They didn't believe in Jesus, but they knew that I had a foundation that made me trustworthy, and I had a heart to give back to the community. So I wound up starting something called Angel Lounge, which brought all the angels together in the community so that we could talk about their deals and learn from each other, become better investors. And I also wound up being president of the High Tech Prayer Breakfast and then eventually the chairman of the High Tech Prayer Breakfast. So that all happened. When I look back on my life, I still don't understand how that happened. I go back to that dinner with Kathy and where I was. I just can't believe what happened to me. And I can't believe when I think about if that didn't happen to me, where would my life be? Where would Kathy be? Where would my kids be? It was this intervention that took place. And I think it was certainly by God. You know, it was, to tie this up just a little with Kathy, is through a set of circumstances, she wound up 12 months after I came to Christ, committed my life to Christ as my Lord and Savior. She came to Christ. I was born again. And then God gave me a born-again wife. And then I heard her, this was about 5-7 years ago, she was talking about us and some of this experience, and she goes, you know what I think is so precious? She goes, God had our marriage be born again. So 35 years later, 35 years of a born-again marriage got us to 46 years, okay, which is kind of crazy. But that's what happened. God is good. Now, for you white-haired guys out there, I won't say white-haired gals, white-haired guys, I turned 60 10 years ago. I was all over what I was doing as an angel investor and all over as a community leader in these couple of organizations. I was well known in Atlanta. That was my identity. And having lost my identity in my late 30s, I was never going to let that happen again because it was just too painful for me. But at 60, I started to lose interest in the thing I was so passionate about for the last 20 years. I said, well, I can't stop doing this. This is what I'm known for. So I continued to invest. But now I'm losing money. Because when you're not interested, you don't do the things the right way in order to make money. Bad way to go. So I actually had to come to terms at about 65. I made an announcement, I'm no longer an angel investor. I'm not doing this anymore. They said, so what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. But I have this sense, this confidence that God's got something so much bigger for me, but I have no idea what it is. And then I get this next vision which says, you need to turn leadership positions over to the next generation. You just don't keep doing this into your late 60s, early 70s. So I went to the people that were on my board at this Angel Lounge thing, and I said, we need to replace me. They said, no, just keep doing what you're doing. Whenever you're in a volunteer position, by the way, no one ever wants you to turn if it's working. Okay? You're in, you're great, it's working, they love you. No one will step forward and say, I'll take over. But I put a plan in place to have that happen, and I replaced myself. And the same thing happened for the high-tech prayer breakfast. I left the chairmanship. So I had no more leadership responsibilities in my community. And people still ask me, so what do you do? What do you do? And I said, God's got something for me, but I have to trust Him enough to release all this right now. And then my sister fell, 81 years old. She fell in Miami where she was living. She has no one else but me. I moved her here. And I'm doing something that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and that is learning how to be a caregiver. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It has driven me to my knees more times than I can tell you. So where's God taking that? So what's happening to me? What's happening to me? And then I get this message. And it came as I was preparing for this prayer breakfast. And the message, and that's how God works, right? I mean, Jerry invites me to this prayer breakfast, and this preparation has helped me enormously, putting this message together to look inwardly and to speak to God to where I am. And he said, I want one last leadership position. I want one more from you. I want you to give it up. I'm like, what do I have left? And he said, what you have left is you are still leader of your life. That's over. I am your king, and you will follow me. And when you do that, we can get to something that's way bigger than you ever thought possible. I'm like, wow. It brought a couple of verses to mind. What's happened to me through my life. The first is, Ephesians 2:10. And that says, "You are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to walk in the works that he created for you to accomplish before the world began." So all I've done, everybody has, and there's a book on here that says your purpose in life. What is my purpose? If you know Jesus, like I got to, that opportunity, is just walking with him in the works that was created ahead of time, all of this stuff happened. I don't know how it happened. It happened. I wish I could tell you that I had a great plan. I didn't. And then the other thing that happened is I've recognized through other people, they say, "Man, you've changed." And we never think we change. We never think we're capable of changing. But this has been 30 years. And there's a verse called Galatians 2:20 that says, "I am crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live by trusting in Jesus who loves me and died for me." And I don't frustrate God by trying to always do the right thing and keep the laws, because if that's the way to eternal life, then Jesus died for nothing. So I look back on that and I say, every time, see, Jesus is in me. I don't have to do it. He does it. And then I wondered, how do you do it? Every time I sin, I ask for forgiveness. Every time I ask for forgiveness, he takes a little piece of me, of the man's way, away. Every time. For 30 years, I've been asking for forgiveness. He keeps taking that away. And what I realize he's doing to me is he's creating me, he's molding me into the man that he wanted me to be when he created me. I went my way. Well, now he's got me going back his way. And God's way is the path of Jesus. He is the path to get there. So that's how my life has changed. And with that, I just say that Jesus promises that he will make everything new again. And that includes me and you. The old will be gone, and the new will come. Thank you.